Good evening. I'm glad that you could join us. This is Jay Taggart with Curtis Minor Architecture. We've been working closely with Lehi City to develop their Lehi and update their Lehi Master Plan. Tonight we will describe some of the processes that we've gone through the research and then where we are currently with the Master Plan. As you know, Lehi City is an old town and has a lot of history and fabric to it. Different buildings that have existed or still exist in Lehi. Lehi Roller Mills is definitely a prominent and very notable building in Lehi. The Adobe building, which is part of a more modern movement that is happening in portions of Lehi. Thanksgiving Point. I'd like to talk a little bit about some facts and figures that have led us to where we are. In 1993, this is the growth and the population of Lehi City. You can see that it's a very concentric, high density. And then in 2005, you can see how that has almost doubled or tripled in size. 2020, this is where Lehi City is today, and it's grown about 10 times what it was in 1993. Here's some population as you see the growth and how much it's gone and increased over time. This is the reason why a master plan is essential to help project the needs of a city before the needs arise, and it's difficult to accommodate those needs in a timely manner. As we were looking at the different buildings, we looked at the current square footage within the Lehi City block and what their future needs would be in 2040. And this is the chart of that information. Let me talk a little bit about some design concepts. As we were looking at a typical city block in Salt Lake or Lehi and other places that use the Utah grid, starts off with a block being divided in 3 squares. A farm, very much of the city was a farming town. You'd see a lot of cities, the main streets with a lot of development where you'd have different styles of buildings built next to each other. You'd see the streets and paths were sized based off of the traffic that was going through there. At that time, it was horse and buggy and horse-drawn carriages, and then the automobile came along and started needs to accommodate the automobile and other innovations that came along like electricity. Here's another example of a town and how you really have this density of buildings side by side, and each of these buildings has a different style and different look to them, different character. Here's one of those buildings in Lehi and others. This was the Broadbent building that used to occupy the site where Lehi Police is currently being built. Here's some sketches, design sketches that we started off with Lehi Police, and we started with the idea that there's these different styles that over time would occur. As one development would happen, they'd build a style, and then 20, 30 years later, they'd build something else adjacent to it, and it had a different style. And so we looked at that and had 3 distinct periods of time in architectural history where styles were, and started to replicate that into a streetscape for Lehi Police. Some enlarged versions of the concepts and it's looking more closely at the broadband building aspect and the modern entry to the police station. Here's some renderings of the police station. You can see the broadband and the modern entry, other elements of different styles as they occur. Looking into the entry from the corner and that monument elevated entry. Another view looking to, this is the south elevation. And then back to that concept that each of these city blocks over time, they would develop them and break them up and give them to their siblings, their children, and then they would build a building or a house, and then they'd partition part of that site off, and then their kids would build a house. Here's some looking at different civic buildings. There's some civic buildings that were very monumental and set back in the site, like this one in American Fork. Similar monumental civic building. And then we also looked at some other civic buildings that were very monumental on the corner, but very asymmetrical in design. Now I'd like to talk to you about design and how that research and content and information led us to where we are today. In the master plan, there's several different types of buildings I'd like to address that are included on the master plan. We have the City Hall, the Courts Building, the Library and Arts, the Fire Station, and the parking structure. And this red line shows the area in which we were looking at and looking to improve and address and master plan over the next 20 plus years and those needs. City Hall, here's a conceptual design of what City Hall could potentially look like. Has an asymmetrical design, very prominent. The Courts Building would be attached to the current Lehi Police building that's being built and slated to be open this year. Library Arts would be another building. We looked at some elements of an outdoor patio where a large overhang would protect individuals from the elements, wind, water, sun, things like that. A space that could be rented out, a space that could be energized and enhanced by the plaza. Fire station that would be built in the current fire station and bring it up to current standards that are needed for essential facilities to perform and function in the manner that they are intended for the public safety. I wanted to look a little bit about paths. What we're showing here are bike paths. So we looked at bike paths and pedestrian paths through the site. The bike boulevard shown in the light green is something that's been master planned before and is intended to be brought through the site. And as you can see, the bike path in that boulevard running east to west traverses through the plaza area and past the Legacy Center and further west. And then you have these bike paths, boulevards that run north and south. And then you have a bike lane on the main center street running here. We also wanted to maintain this connection from the police building entry down to Legacy and that view that way. I'd like to talk a little bit about the parking. Lehi City conducted an analysis of the existing parking. They looked at how much each of their parking areas were being used and time of day. They gave some analysis and found that there was some capacity in most of the parking stalls for additional individuals to park. The Legacy Center was one of those that was most of the time full capacity in peak times. So we looked at that analysis. We looked at the square footage of these new buildings that we've discussed, and we calculated what those needs would be in the future for parking, and as we take up some parking stalls with buildings and plazas, and how do we increase the amount of parking to accommodate the needs of these buildings and plazas, and create something that's better used. So we created some parking stalls that are located adjacent to the courts, and internal parking stalls adjacent to the City Hall, parking stalls along Center Street, and in the current parking area of Legacy Center, creating a two-story parking structure that would double or triple the capacity of the current Legacy surface parking. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the public space and what that entails and what we're trying to accommodate in the city in their needs for public space. Most cities are really about building and then having some public space surrounding that, but this master plan was more about creating a public space and having the buildings surround that public space, where the public space is really thought through and the needs of that public space. As we look at this public space, we've got the large green public plaza, we've got a double-sided stage, we've got a boulevard that connects to Main Street, and then we have other street connections that connect through the site, like I showed on the previous map, through to Legacy Center. This is another look. We've increased and enhanced the drop-off zone by the Legacy Center. We've created and maintained the current obelisk and taken the statues and created statue garden walk along here. This is an area parking stall that would be available for food trucks and other areas like that. These raised planters help to enhance the space. We've got a lot of different changes in pavement going through here. This large green grass is also drivable so that you can have a variety of different events, small concerts, large conferences, any type of event you can think of, raised sitting areas for people to sit down and pause, and different connections of a lot of vegetation that creates shade and helps to enhance the space. Here's a shot looking from Main Street through the site. Seeing that connection, really wanted to enhance that connection from Main Street and strengthen that through the rest of the site. This is a shot looking towards the City Hall, and you can see double-sided stage to the left. You can see that parking area that could potentially have food trucks and where that statue garden is. This is the current museum. Different types of pedestrians, the paths for cyclists and people walking, people with strollers, raised planters to really enhance the space, give a great connection. This is where we've improved the drop-off area, the existing obelisk, and the area where it's existing statue garden with the relocated statues down here. Another shot looking from Main Street. This is across the plaza looking west, looking at the Arts and Library Arts Building and the double-sided stage. Here's looking from the double-sided stage across the plaza. looking northwest. This is where the food trucks would be located. This is a shot looking southeast. This is looking south across the plaza. There's the double-sided stage, raised seating areas, different changes in pavement. This is an alley that's lined with trees that really create an enhanced space that connects to the Legacy Center. Here's a street side view of that same alley, and then this is where the food trucks would be. The obelisk, the enhanced drop-off for Legacy Center. Looking back from the Legacy Center towards the Lehi Police. There's the future courts and the current Lehi Police under construction. Another shot of the courts building, City Hall building, the Library Arts building, the fire station. Next, I'd like to talk about the phasing briefly. The phases will happen over 20 plus years, approximately starting every 2 years, but getting further and further apart. But looking at this and the needs of how the city needs to accommodate this growth over 20 plus years. The first phase that would occur would be the City Hall and the parking adjacent to it and all that landscaping. And then the second phase would be the courts building and the fire station. And then in the third phase would be enhancing this drop-off area, the parking structure, and the library arts, and then also relocating the literacy center to the arts building, the current arts building. And then phase 4 would be completing the rest of the plaza. Phase 5 would be taking the functions of the senior center out and putting them in this bank building down here and using that additional space to expand and improve the Legacy Center. I've really appreciated the time tonight talking with you. Thank you for your time, and let us know if there's any questions or comments you have.